Hello and welcome to the Software Engineering Unlocked podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Michaela, and today I have the pleasure to talk to Annie Liew, a designer who turned into a software developer. I want to talk with her about how she experienced transitioning from design to engineering, how she got her first engineering job, and how she now builds software in a startup as the first engineering hire. So I'm super excited to have Annie here with me. Annie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. So happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you joined. So, Annie, you have been a designer, and then one day you wake up and you say, I now want to be an engineer. Or how did that happen? And what did you do about transitioning from design to engineering?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a long-winded process, to be honest. I studied multimedia design at university, and I worked for several years as a designer in Australia and in England. And after that, I decided, okay, I wanted to change of pace. I really wanted to move to Japan because traveling is something that I really enjoy. And so I actually went from design to being an English teacher for several years, and then decided, okay, I'm going to move to Canada and try to get back into design. But because the landscape had changed so much, it was a real struggle, and I didn't know anybody in Toronto as well. So I basically was in this position where I was just like freelancing on the side, like trying to get my design hustle going. But I was also like working a bunch of minimal, low paced jobs to kind of pay the bills at the same time. So I was kind of in this place where I was like, okay, this is not where I want to be. What can I do? How can I level up? How can I get the skills that I needed? And I looked into something called boot camps. At the beginning, I looked into a lot of UX boot camps, and then I found a school called HackerYou. They're called Juno now, but at the time, the only bootcamp that they offered was a front end web development bootcamp. But I really like the community that they've built around it. So I've built websites in the past before, and it wasn't something that I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed the designing part of things, but I was always happy to hand off the coding, part to the developers. However, I did have to build websites, and when I did them, I didn't enjoy it at the time. But this time, I thought, okay, let's try again. Let's see if something has changed. And so I started attending small kind of little free, not seminars, but like workshops around the Toronto area. And I was like, okay, what is this Flexbox? What is this? And everything had changed. And so I started getting really curious about it. And so I remember it was really interesting because I never thought that I'd be interested in code. But after doing the workshops, I was like, okay, maybe I can do this. And so I applied for the bootcamp afterwards, got accepted. And as they say, the rest is history.
Oh, okay. And so you said you were mainly interested by the community. Was it an online community or was it an offline community? And how did you get in touch with the community? How have you, like, I imagine that you get access to the community after you join, but it seems like you knew the community exists even before you joined this particular bootcamp.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And that was the reason why I joined the community. I always have this idea that it's less about what you do and more about who you do it with. I really like this idea. And so the way like HackerYou has or Juno College has a really strong community because there's a lot of past alumni who shared about their journey. So I started, contacting them and asking them, hey, how was your experience? Would you meet up for like a coffee so I could talk to you about it? And I went to several events and talked to a lot of them, and every single one of them said this was something that I don't regret. I 100% recommended it. This was pre-COVID, so the bootcamp was an in-person bootcamp as well. So it was 9 weeks of 10 to 6, and then on top of that, you have your assignments and classes. So it was just like a full-time in-person bootcamp.
Okay, so it's 9 weeks. So you make a commitment for 9 weeks. You leave everything other aside, right? And you just go and do your work there. And I don't know, do you have homework then? Or do you do everything in class and then you go home and then that's it? The next day you do it again?
Yeah, well, it started off pretty, easy, where it was just like the 10 to 6, but there's so much work. And the way the bootcamp works is that you're constantly building projects So there was no way that you would have been able to do everything just in the 10 to 6. There's been like it's such a fun little like it's almost like a summer camp experience because we all had access to the school basically. And there'll be nights when it's like midnight and there's like all my classmates around me and we're all just working hard and we have like pizza coming and it's just a really fun, and that's what I mean about community as well, is it has a really fun atmosphere where you're doing something difficult, you're trying to transition into this new career, but they're doing their best to, support you along the way and make it fun. And yeah, so it was, I don't think I actually went to the grocery store for about 8 weeks because, and I'm really lucky to have a partner who could do that, but it was just so intense, like the work that I was, doing, the projects that I was doing and what I was learning, that I just really didn't have time. And a lot of people just didn't really have time to do other things.
And so, do you still have contact with a few of those people that you met there?
Yes, I do. Yeah, and there's still a very strong alumni network as well. There's like a Slack alumni network. I still do some mentoring and I go back and help like, current students, and I've spoken on some panels with them as well for people trying to get their first jobs. So yeah, I'm still an active part of the community, and that's something I like about the school, is that a lot of past alumni are still very active.
Yeah, that's really nice. And so, do you think it helped you also get your first job, or how did you make that transition now from, okay, you're doing those 9 weeks, and then what happens then?
Yeah, definitely helped me to get a good job because the school has a lot of industry contacts. And one of the things that they did was that we had an industry day where they invited a lot of potential employers to an industry day where we all kind of showcased our work. It kind of almost works like a blind date if you think about it, where all the students were sitting around tables and we had like a minute to give our pitch and to talk about ourselves and to share a project that we're really proud of. And then the bell rings and then they kind of like go to the next student. So
So it's like speed dating.
yeah, it was completely like speed dating, but for employers versus, and like potential employees. So it was like very stressful because all of us were trying to like practice our speeches and or pitches and, like trying to finalize the work that we wanted to show. But as a result of the industry day, I got invited to 2 interviews with some companies and I ended up getting an offer, which I accepted a week later. So I was actually the first person from my cohort to accept the job.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. And so, how long is that ago?
I graduated in summer of 2019 and I started in August. Yeah.
And you started in August, and then you worked at that company as a software engineer, front-end software engineer.
Yes. So I was hired as a front end developer and I was there for a year and a quarter.
How was that experience? Was that good? Did you feel like now you deepening your knowledge, or did you learn a lot?
So the first job I had as a software developer basically was I worked for an agency, and what that gave me was a lot of structure around things that you don't learn in bootcamp. So I got introduced to like agile methodology and stand-ups and the process of, tickets and Jira, and a lot of soft skills that, not soft skills, but a lot of processes, internal company processes don't that you can't really learn in a bootcamp, but you have to learn them on the job. I also got exposure to, one of the very big things was I got exposure to a lot of big, large code bases, some with legacy code. And I also had to build or architect sites from like the ground up. So, and I worked with so many different websites. They are a WordPress VIP partner. So all our sites were done in WordPress, but I was doing like the architecturing in, like HTML, CSS and some jQuery as well. But because I had exposure to so many different types of websites and processes, it was a really big boost, I would say, and definitely helped me to get my next job for sure.
And so, is the next job that you then accepted, is that the one that you're currently at? Is that the startup that you're working for?
That's correct. I've been there about 4 months.
And so, how does that happen? Like, why did you change, and why did you go from an agency to a startup? What was what was the interest for you?
hmm So I've been working at the agency for quite a while, and because I was doing a lot of the same type of work, I wasn't feeling that I was starting to feel like I wasn't growing anymore, and I was also quite worried about my JavaScript skills in particular because I was so comfortable doing all the like site architecturing in HTML and CSS, and I would basically get like I was basically lead in a lot of those projects that came up, but I wasn't really practicing my JavaScript or React skills, and those were things that we had learned in bootcamp. So I'm going to say that I'm really, really fortunate because Twitter actually played a big part in how I got this job or this offer. The company is called Pastel, and they were looking for their first hire, someone to, basically take over the front end. And they had a list of potential people that they wanted to reach out to and, in interview and invite them to go through the interview process. And I was one of them. So I didn't actually apply for this job, but the CTO reached out to me and said, "Hey, really like what you're doing, saw some of your work that you've shared, and we have this position coming up. Would you be interested in applying for it or going through the process?" So I looked at the stack. It was, Next.js, it was React, it was TypeScript. It was all the kind of modern technologies that I really wanted to learn. And so I thought, okay, let's give this a go. And I did. And I, went through like the interview process. I did a coding challenge, which was a take home challenge for a week. I built an entire app for that. It was very stressful. I hadn't touched React for so long by that point. So it was a lot of learning. I was still working and then trying to do this on the side. Yeah, it was a very, very stressful week. I remember that, but it was definitely worth it.
And so now you are working in that startup, and what are your responsibilities?
So because when they hired me, they knew that my JavaScript side of skills weren't amazing. And I told them, I was very honest with them at the beginning. I said, I'm not going to be like a, JavaScript ninja from the get-go because I haven't worked professionally with JavaScript for so long. And they were very aware of that. So they knew my abilities from the start. And one of my main responsibilities at this moment is just to basically level up as fast as I can to get myself to a point where I can just do it really well and eventually be responsible for the entire front end. The other thing I do as well is I build features. We have like a roadmap where we, look at all the features that we have coming up, and I work on building those features. Occasionally, we have front end bugs come in as well, which I work on. But the two main things I would say that I am responsible for right now is building features and just like learning as fast as I can to get myself to a spot where I can be super comfortable.
Yeah, I think that sounds like really good next step for you, and the ability that you can grow in that role so much. How old is the startup, and how does that work? A startup, I imagine, right? Like extremely stressful and a lot of pressure. We have to ship. So how does that work in a startup that there is so much time for you to learn things, and how, is everything actually running smoothly, and so it just doesn't need, there's not so much pressure, or how does it work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this startup actually started in March 2017, and I got hired and started in October last year, October 2020. So they had been going strong for almost 4 years by that point that they hired me, and they were basically profitable at that point. So they decided to, start growing and becoming like an actual company. So just to give you a bit of context, there's actually just three people in the startup before I got hired. It was the CTO, the CEO, and the product guy. So a designer, an engineer, and operations. So as they were growing, they realized they needed more help, and that's kind of what I got hired for. Because we're profitable at the moment and we have we have a SaaS product that is a subscription model, we know that the money is coming in all the time. So while there is a bit of pressure to ship features, and I definitely feel it, I think a lot of the pressure is more the internal pressure that I feel to kind of, validate that I belong here by shipping features. But I've had a lot of discussions with my CTO, and basically he said one of the things that is important is that I'm able to learn to like basically start slow to speed up later. So they understand the importance of learning and growing as a junior developer or as someone very early on in their career, and they're thinking the long term game. It's I can like probably like try and just like really hustle and ship a lot of features, but would they be like really good features? Will I actually learn the things I need to learn so that I can do it a lot better, like later on? For the company, I think it's like for everyone involved, is really important that we have like a strong foundation built first so that we are able to then, become a lot better and faster later on.
I really like this long-term vision and long-term thinking. It's something that I think is quite rare, even for large corporation that could definitely invest into their employees. There is often a very short-sighted action that I feel like you have to provide value and you have to provide it now. But there are companies that I hear really provide value also to their employees. Like for example, Automatic. I know from several people that work there. They're also, for example, I think a really great place to work, because when employees are in trouble, I always heard like they are there, right? Like they give you paid time off, or like some time to breathe and to think and so on. And so I really like that mindset as well, that they're getting someone on the team and they're investing in that person. And I think, I don't know about you, but probably it also makes you very loyal to that company.
Yeah, I really love what you said about investment, because that was basically in some of my discussions with my CTO. They are definitely investing in me. So when I got hired, they knew that I had the skills coming in from as a designer, and they wanted someone who could basically have ownership of the front end and not have to worry about, oh, can you move this pixel here, can you move that there, like that's all taken care of. I'm very, very pedantic about those details, and like the UX and the UI of things. They don't have to worry about that at all. So he said it's a lot easier to teach someone to code than to actually care about the product and how it looks and how it feels. So yeah, I totally resonated with everything that you said there.
Yeah, and I think this is a really good perspective as well, right? So you want actually the right people that are caring, and I think also people that feel cared for. And at least from what you tell me here, it feels like you feel cared for, which I think translates back, right? So it's like giving and taking. So one thing that I'm super interested in as well is, how do you experience developing software in a startup? Like, what are the processes there? Is it very flexible? Do you have like mentorship? Do you have like code reviews? What about testing? Like what you tell me, it's like two people, right? So it's the CTO and you. So how do you do that? How much formality is there, and who takes over what?
Something that we discussed at the very beginning is that with processes, we don't have processes for processes' sake. So that's because as a startup, we want to basically move fast and iterate on things and be able to push things out. We basically follow although not formally, we follow an agile process where we have stand-ups, we do the sprints, and we do retroactives at the end of the week to see what has gone well, what could be improved, and then kind of reiterate on that. In terms of the product development process, we basically have roadmap meetings, roadmap plannings every 1 or 2 months, basically, when we kind of look at the roadmap that we're building and seeing what features need to be built. And the way we decide what features need to be built is based on kind of two ideas. The first idea is, is it something that has been requested? Is it something that customers have requested? Or is it something that we have some data around how customers are using our app? Is that something that they're doing often enough? And then the second part of that is, what is the potential impact of this feature? So for example, like maybe customers like request something and they request it a few times, but is that going to have a big impact on the company or on like the usability of the app? Like, will it help us to get more potential clients, or so kind of those two things are two things that we think about when we plan out our roadmap and look at all the features that we have available. We then do like a kind of usually a 1 month plan where we work on we prioritize the features that we're going to work on, and then we just basically go for it. In terms of mentorship, I have a very close relationship, I would say, with my CTO slash manager. We do our one-on-ones. We talk very, very openly about things like imposter syndrome, the how we want to shape the culture of the company, what kind of company that they want to be. One of the things that really impressed me from the beginning was that they said, okay, and this was during the interview process, they said, we are very keen on building a great company culture, the kind of company that people want to come and stay. Like, we don't want to have like high turnover. We want our people to feel valued, and we want them to have autonomy over their workflow and the things that they do, and we want them to have an impact. Like, you can definitely make an impact in our startup. So the type of management style that they have here is very, very suitable for me, because I tend to get bored easily. But in a startup, because I'm doing so many different things and I have such a, I guess, like impact or influence or ownership over the product, I feel very invested in the job and in the company.
When I actually started out of university, I thought, like, what kind of company do I want to work for? And I was very impressed by these large corporations. But I think it was more the names than everything else, right? So and now over the time, I think my view shifted quite a bit, because at a startup you can maybe make the whole the whole half of the product, right? Or maybe the whole product. So there's definitely something there which also right now fascinates me more, like having more impact, having more, like, yeah, contributing more, and also maybe different hats. That's something that I liked a lot. Actually, when I was working at Microsoft, I was in a very specific position, right? I was in the tools for software engineering teams. And so there was a lot of research, a lot of innovation. And I also had like a lot of hats, a lot of flexibility, and a lot of impact, to be honest. But then when I wanted to transition, I looked at other teams and thought, no, I don't know. This is a little bit too restrictive for me. How is that for you? Do you have like several hats? Well, do you have like probably designer hat, then you have maybe the developer hat, but are there other hats, other responsibilities that you take over in the company?
I wouldn't say that I have like responsibilities per se, but I would say that I have the flexibility to kind of shape the role that I'm in and look into things that I'm interested in. So, for example, one of the things that I did probably in the first couple of months is that I joined calls with our clients, with our CEO, so that I could like talk to the clients specifically and ask them questions about how they're using the product, how they like it. And so that gave me a lot of, I guess, empathy for our users and how they're using the product. And actually, this product is something that I use myself. So it's like I am the user at the same time as something that I'm building for myself. So it's interesting. But I also, yeah, like because it's such a small company, we do a lot of different things. For example, I don't have to do this. My core responsibility is to build features and like be in engineering. But one of the things that I also do is that sometimes I'll reach out to people I think that would get a benefit from using Pastel, and so that's something that I do as well. It's very, 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 very flexible. I've actually never worked in a company that's been like so flexible before. Like, there isn't like any hierarchy, like structure. It's like quite flat. So everyone's just kind of responsible for everything. We communicate very openly and discuss things, and it's very much a process where it's very collaborative. We all work together, and we're very intentional about the things that we do that would move the company or move the product forward. So, and also just going back to what you said about, mentorship. And one of the things that attracted me, I guess, about large companies was the idea of mentorship. And because like traditionally we feel like large companies have very formal processes in place for mentoring like younger developers. So it was something that I was very, very worried about when I was talking to the CTO, because there is no formal processes. It's a bit chaotic, like in many ways. So I asked him about that, and we have code reviews. So I think maybe you're familiar with the idea that code reviews are in many ways a form of mentorship anyway, because you're getting your code review, you're getting a lot of feedback. He's very good at the feedback as well. He doesn't tell me just do this. He tells me the why, and yeah, it's like very, very detailed, and it's really helpful. But the other thing that we do very consistently, at least twice a week, if not more, is that we pair on a very regular basis. And that's been an immense source of mentorship as well.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, in a company like that's that small, right? And you have like the CTO as the main engineering person, you have access to the CTO, right? I mean, it means that it's the person that shaped the whole product, that knows the architecture. So, which means in another company, there will be several layers that you have maybe to go through, or people are really busy maybe also. And here, because there's an investment from the CTO also in you, right? It's in both interests to be like pairing and exchanging ideas and learning. And so, yeah, I can imagine that this is actually a really good spot to be in and have like almost like like a really personal mentorship, which, you know, there are mentorship programs in larger organizations, but I don't think that people are that invested, right, in their mentees. Then probably your CTO is in you, right? Because there is like higher stakes to make it work for that person, right? So one thing that I wanted to touch base, which is a little bit out of context, but you mentioned it at the beginning, and I think it's interesting for a lot of people that are looking for jobs, maybe that are coming out of boot camp, you know, coming or transitioning or coming out of college or whatnot, right? And getting a foot into tech. You said, well, actually, my Twitter was super helpful. So how are you using your Twitter? How are you building your following? What's the value that you get out of Twitter, and how can you know, how can others maybe also benefit from that and let it help them also a little bit in their job search?
It's interesting because I was never really a social media person. I had to open my Twitter account because my bootcamp made us open the account. And I remember in the very early days, I had no idea how to use Twitter. I was like, okay, I have to tweet something. What do I talk about? How do I connect with people? It was a very confusing kind of landscape for me because it was just a platform that I wasn't familiar with and I hadn't used it before. When it started to change was when the pandemic started, and I'd been in my job for a while and I was very comfortable with what I was doing, but I really wanted to level up. So I joined 100 Days of Code and I started sharing my process on Twitter. And that was when I started to meet more people, build a community, and basically that was how like my following grow. I guess it was very unexpected. I wasn't expecting it and it was very intimidating at the beginning. But in terms of why our bootcamp made us open a Twitter account, it was because they knew the value of having a online personal brand. And your Twitter account or any other, like your LinkedIn and stuff, your website is all part of that overarching idea of your personal brand. And it's really helpful because a lot of companies do checks on you to see what kind of person you are outside of just the code that you do. And people hire other people for soft skills, not just, you know, like they can, you know, like do like a for loop and stuff, but it's actually like what you bring to the company. And Twitter is a way to not only kind of show the projects that you're working on, which I was doing. I was like doing a lot of projects and just sharing them all freely on Twitter and on CodePen as well. But it's also for a chance for them to see who you are as a person. And I think that is the value of like Twitter or some of the other social networks as well.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So, Annie, thank you so much for taking the time talking with me. Maybe I want to use the last few minutes to just catch up with things that you wanted to say to my listener, or, you know, like something that you want to leave people with. I think especially people that are coming from boot camps would be interested, people that are transitioning, right? What is your advice for them? What do you think? What should they, yeah, how do you think that they could make themselves successful or set them up for success?
One of the things that I heard over and over again was that your network is so important. And it was something I really, really felt when I started to get into coding, because when I came to Toronto and I didn't have a network, it was extremely difficult for me to get into design. I didn't know anybody. And once I tapped into a network and a community, everything became so much easier. So there is a lot of value in reaching out to people, because at the end of the day, the things that you don't build features and products and code by yourself. You build it in a team with other people, and having mentorship. And a mentor can also be just someone like who's a little bit ahead of you, who can look on your current journey and give you advice on what you can do, and just talk to them and kind of encourage you as well. Having that kind of connection with someone who is already in the field or with a larger community, I think, has a really large impact on, I would say, a developer's career. Something that I heard from somebody, I remember this very clearly, was that he said that the most successful developers are people who have a large network to draw from, and also they're not kind of tied into one specific like technology or something. They're always kind of learning, they're always open to hearing about like more things, and they have like a large depth or breadth of knowledge, and they're successful because they can draw from all these different areas. And I think that was like something that had always stuck with me. So yeah, like reach out to people, get involved in community, but also actually do work. The only reason that I was able to probably attract the attention of my current employer was because I was like really, really putting in the hours of all the projects I was doing. And I think it shows as well, like the kind of work that I was sharing, like I had spent hours and hours on them and just kind of refining my skills, getting better and improving each time. So those are things that come across when you're sharing. And it's very easy for people, I guess, like as new devs, to become very discouraged when you're looking for your first job and you get a lot of like rejections, and it's really hard, it's like soul crushing. But you kind of have to understand that rejection is not, it's not personal. It might be just that the company didn't, it's not the right fit at the right time, or there's a lot of different factors, and it's not like really personal. And to kind of help you to get over that hump is just to do work that you want to be hired for, or you want other people to see. And I think being able to show and share your work and show that you're passionate about what you do and that you're willing to learn is very important.
And so was that work that you showed and that you did, was that outside of work, or were you able to showcase the work that you did for work?
It was outside of work. And that was because the work that I was doing at work belongs to the company, and I was comfortable with the job that I was doing there. So I wanted to learn other skills beyond the work that I was doing at work. And actually, this brings out a really good point, because something that maybe like you kind of feel this as well. Like tech is one of those industries where there's almost an expectation to work outside your job. And I just want to clarify and say, like, that is not expected, and you definitely shouldn't do it, because like a doctor doesn't, practice like operations in like his or her free time. And like I don't like the feeling that I have to, work outside of my job. But it was something that I wanted to do personally to kind of level up, because I wasn't getting the kind of skills I needed at my current job at that time. So that was the reason why I did it.
I also think like building up those profiles that we just touched on before, right, is something that's really hard if you're employed because most of the time the code doesn't belong to you, right? And it's not something that you can easily share and say, oh, look at my GitHub, there's my code that I write for my employer. That's confidential, right? So if you want to fill your GitHub with nice stuff, it somehow means that you're doing stuff outside of work. But yeah, we have to be really realistic that a lot of people are not, they don't have the position to do that because they have like a full-time job, they have people to care for, right? So yeah, I think I understand, and I understand that this probably has a big impact, but I'm also, as you said, I'm not advocating or at all, right, that people should need to do it. But it's definitely interesting to hear that that's the way how you grow your following, how you grow your skills, right? So there is a trade-offs that you have to make, and if you are in a position to do it, and that's great. And I think it's also not good to forbid people to do something outside, right? I mean, sometimes it's what you have to do. That's That's how it is, right?
And in lieu of that as well, I also think that's why having a network is so important, because that's how you can get your next job without having to do all the extra work of learning outside of your full-time job.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Annie, thank you so much for taking the time talking with me today. It was really a pleasure to have you. I wish you all the best for your job and that you learn a lot. And I will continue following you on Twitter and see what you're doing. And, I'm really excited for you. Thank you so much for being on my show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Okay, bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed another episode of the Software Engineering Unlocked podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll talk to you again in 2 weeks. Bye!